In the autumn of 2021, deep in the silent hills of northern Arizona, a group of weekend explorers descended into an abandoned mine. What they expected was the usual dust, stone, and broken tools of a forgotten past. Instead, their torchlight revealed something that froze them in place. 2 sleeping bags, faded with age, lying side by side. But these were not ordinary bags of weary travelers. Each one had been roughly stitched shut, sealed from top to bottom with thick twine, as if someone wanted to hide something within. When the authorities arrived and the bags were finally opened, the truth spilled out like a nightmare. Inside were the skeletal remains of a young couple who had vanished more than a decade earlier. Who were they, and why did their innocent journey end in such horror? What kind of hand sewed their bodies into those bags and lowered them into the darkness, ensuring they would remain hidden for years? This was not just a disappearance, but a deliberate act of cruelty, wrapped in mystery and silence. In this video, we step into the shadows of this unsolved crime, a story that continues to haunt investigators and families alike. Stay with us as we unravel the chilling puzzle of Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards. Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards were not celebrities, nor were they thrill-seekers chasing danger. They were simply 2 young people at the beginning of their adult lives, much like any ordinary couple one might see walking through Connaught Place in Delhi, sipping chai together, or planning a weekend outing. Ray, just 26 years old, was a graphic designer by profession. His friends remembered him as quiet but creative, a young man who could spend hours lost in his sketches. Nicole, 24, worked as a nurse. She was known for her patience, her soft laugh, and the way she called her mother every Sunday evening without fail. Both of them were based in Phoenix, Arizona, leading lives that were modest yet full of small joys. They had been together for nearly 2 years, building their relationship on simple routines, sharing meals, taking photographs during trips, and dreaming about a stable future. They were not wanderers in search of extremes. They liked to step out of the city every now and then, pitch a tent under the stars, cook over a small stove, and talk until the night grew silent. For them, travel was not an escape, but a way to feel alive in the open air. That June of 2010, they had planned nothing more ambitious than a weekend drive northwards. A visit to the Grand Canyon, a few stops at scenic spots, and then back home. It was the kind of plan countless young couples make when they want a short break from their routines. On the morning of the 11th of June, they packed carefully, as if ticking items off a list. A tent, 2 sleeping bags, a portable stove, food supplies, water bottles, and a camera to capture their memories. Everything pointed to a short and safe trip. Their silver Toyota Corolla, recently serviced, was in perfect condition. Friends later said they were excited, full of good energy, looking forward to a quiet getaway. At the petrol station near the Grand Canyon, they looked like any couple stopping for fuel and snacks. The cashier remembered Ray at the wheel, Nicole beside him studying a map, a bag of chips in her hand. There was nothing unusual in their behavior, no tension, no fear, no sense of foreboding. And yet, by the evening of the 13th of June, when Nicole failed to call her mother as promised, the ordinary turned into the unthinkable. The habit that had been so constant was suddenly broken, and silence replaced the cheerful voice that usually reassured her family she was safe. By Monday morning, neither Ray nor Nicole appeared at work. Phones rang unanswered, their car could not be traced, and their families slipped quickly from concern into panic. That is the cruel heart of this story. Ray and Nicole were not reckless adventurers. They were not people living on the edge. They were young, responsible, and careful. They loved, they worked, they made plans for weekends, and yet they vanished. The injustice lies in this very ordinariness. If it could happen to them, it could happen to anyone. This thought is what continues to disturb the mind long after their story is told. The final days of Ray and Nicole unfolded with the deceptive calm of a routine trip. On Friday morning, the 11th of June 2010, they left their home in Phoenix. their silver Toyota Corolla carrying all the essentials for a simple holiday. There was no sign of worry, no shadow of fear, only the excitement of two young people eager to see the Grand Canyon and spend a night beneath the stars. By Saturday, the 12th of June, they were still on track with their plan. At a small gas station near the south entrance to the park, they were seen alive for the last time. The cashier later recalled them as just another young couple, buying fuel, a bottle of water, and a packet of chips. Ray drove while Nicole sat beside him, head bent over a folded map, marking their route. Nothing appeared out of place. Nothing hinted at the darkness waiting just ahead. After that, silence. Nicole's mother expected her daughter's regular Sunday evening phone call, a ritual she never missed. That call never came. Hours stretched into a restless night, and by Monday morning, both Ray and Nicole failed to turn up for work. Their phones, once so reliable, were now unreachable. The signals had gone dead the very day they were last seen. For their families, confusion turned into fear. Calls to hospitals, police stations, and friends brought no answers. It was as if the couple had driven into the wilderness and vanished without leaving a trail. The first breakthrough came a week later, when a Forest Patrol officer stumbled upon their Toyota parked at the edge of an old logging road, far from where they had last been spotted. The vehicle was locked, its windows intact, with no sign of a struggle. Inside, everything was neatly arranged. Their tent, backpacks, and clothes were still in place. In the glove compartment were their wallets and documents, untouched. On the front seat lay the open map and the half-finished packet of chips. The keys rested on the driver's seat, as if the car had been left in a hurry, but not stolen or looted. It was a scene that looked staged, almost eerily untouched, as if time itself had paused. This is where the strangeness deepened. If they had decided to go for a short walk, why would they leave behind their wallets, their phones, even water? If it had been a robbery, why was every valuable item still inside? If it was a kidnapping, why were there no tire tracks, no foreign fingerprints, no evidence of a struggle? Police dogs picked up their scent only for a few hundred meters before it disappeared over rocky ground, leaving nothing to follow. Imagine yourself in that position, standing by the silent car. The belongings tell you the couple never intended to vanish. The neatness suggests no chaos, no crime of passion. Yet the absence of clues screams of something calculated, something chilling. If you were the detective, what would you conclude? The puzzle was not only unsolved, it was unnatural, and that is what made the disappearance of Ray and Nicole a story that still haunts investigators today. When the police first began their investigation, they approached the case as they would any other missing persons report, starting with the simplest explanations. The first theory was that Ray and Nicole had simply lost their way in the vast wilderness of northern Arizona. After all, the forests, canyons, and endless stretches of desert could disorient even the most careful travelers. Perhaps they had wandered off the road, underestimated the harsh terrain, and perished in the elements. But this idea collapsed almost immediately. Why would they leave their tent, food, water, and even their phones in the car? Every survival instinct dictates carrying essentials when venturing out. Their belongings, untouched and neatly packed, argued against the notion of two young people lost in the wild. The second theory was voluntary disappearance. Could they have staged their vanishing act, leaving behind their lives in Phoenix for something new, far away? At first glance, it seemed plausible. Young couples sometimes take drastic steps. But when investigators looked closer, it made no sense. Why abandon wallets filled with cash, bank cards, and valid identification documents? Why leave behind the very resources needed to begin anew? If they were running away, the first thing they would have carried was money and identification. This was not a couple attempting to disappear by choice. Another possibility raised was suicide. It was a dark thought, but police had to consider it. Perhaps Ray and Nicole had driven out to the secluded woods to end their lives together. But again, the facts refused to align. Their families and friends reported no signs of depression, no farewell letters, no sudden changes in behavior. Their careers were steady, their relationships stable. And if it was suicide, why leave their car in such an orderly condition, with snacks half-eaten and a map still open on the seat? There was no indication that either of them was preparing for such an act of despair. That left the most unsettling theory: kidnapping. Could they have encountered someone on that lonely highway? Maybe they stopped to help a stranger, or perhaps someone posing as a police officer flagged them down. This would explain why they left the car voluntarily, without a struggle. Yet even this line of thought raised new questions. If it was abduction, why was there no trace of another vehicle near the site? No tire tracks, no fingerprints other than their own, no sign of violence. The scene was eerily sterile, as if scrubbed of all evidence. Each theory, considered one by one, led investigators into a dead end. Lost? Impossible without essentials. Voluntary disappearance? Contradicted by money and documents left behind. Suicide? No motive, no evidence. Kidnapping? Too clean, too strange. The more detectives tried to fit the puzzle together, the more unnatural the case seemed. It was as though the couple had stepped out of their car and vanished into thin air. And with every rejected theory, the mystery only grew deeper, leaving behind a chilling silence that no amount of logic could break. For weeks after the disappearance, the forests of northern Arizona echoed with the sound of helicopters, search parties, and police radios. Volunteers scoured ravines, combed through abandoned cabins, and traced every trail that might have hidden a clue. But soon the noise faded, and silence took its place. Every lead evaporated. No footprints beyond those already found, no use of their bank cards, no signal from their phones. It was as though Ray and Nicole had walked off the map of existence itself. What remained was only an abandoned car and questions that refused to be answered. The case slipped into the chilling category investigators dread most: a cold case. The photos of the smiling couple remained pinned on bulletin boards in police stations, their files moved from the active desk to the dusty shelves of archives. Each new detective assigned to the case would flip through the papers, hoping to see something missed. And yet every time they reached the same conclusion: there was nothing, not a single thread to pull. For the families, the coldness of the case was unbearable. Nicole's mother would sit by the phone each Sunday evening, remembering how her daughter had promised to call after every trip. Ray's parents clung to photographs of their son at family gatherings, unable to accept the silence that had replaced his voice. They hired private investigators, gave interviews to local newspapers, and even maintained websites in the hope that someone, somewhere, might stumble upon a forgotten clue. But as the months turned into years, hope began to look more like grief disguised as patience. The community, too, became part of this strange vigil. Online forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries buzzed with theories. Amateur sleuths from across the world picked apart every known detail: the abandoned car, the untouched belongings, the sudden disappearance. Some insisted it was the work of a highway serial killer, a phantom predator hunting travelers. Others believed the couple had accidentally discovered something they were never meant to see: an illegal operation, a hidden dwelling in the woods, perhaps even an underground drug lab. With every passing year, the theories grew wilder, but none could be proven. 11 years is a long time. Children grow into adults, towns change, and memories fade. Yet for the families of Ray and Nicole, each day stretched endlessly, filled with the same questions that had no answers. For investigators, the case became a haunting presence in the background of their careers, a reminder of how sometimes, despite every tool of modern policing, people can vanish as if swallowed by the earth itself. The cold years added a weight of dread, not only because 2 young lives had been lost, but because the absence of answers meant danger still lingered. Whoever had taken them was out there, living unnoticed, perhaps blending into ordinary life. And so, the silence around the case did not bring closure. Instead, it deepened the sense of unease. a reminder that the line between safety and horror is thinner than we imagine. October 2021. More than a decade had passed since Ray and Nicole vanished, when fate decided to stir the silence. A group of weekend cavers, men who spent their free time exploring forgotten shafts and tunnels of Arizona's old mining country, stumbled upon an entrance nearly hidden under rocks and wild bushes. The mine was unmarked, its opening choked with rubble, as though nature itself wanted it forgotten. With ropes and lamps, they descended into the suffocating darkness, expecting only dust, damp air, and relics of a bygone age. But what their torchlight revealed turned a hobby into horror. In one corner of the shaft lay two shapes, elongated and still. At first they seemed like discarded sacks, maybe old camping gear left behind decades ago. Yet as the explorers drew closer, their hearts sank. They were sleeping bags, one blue, one green. The fabric was faded, coated in dust, but unmistakably modern. Stranger still, the zippers were not opened, not even closed. They had been sewn shut from top to bottom with thick, coarse thread. The stitches were uneven, almost crude, but intentional, done by hand with grim determination. The air was heavy with an odor that confirmed their fears. They retreated at once and called the authorities. When police and forensic experts finally brought the bags to the surface and carefully cut the seams, the nightmare became undeniable. Inside were skeletal remains, identified soon after through dental records as Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards, the couple who had vanished 11 years earlier. Families who had spent years in uncertainty finally had an answer, but not the kind that brings peace. Yet this discovery did not solve the case. It only deepened the mystery. The autopsy reports revealed chilling details. Ray had died from a brutal blow to the back of the head, while Nicole's fragile neck bones bore the unmistakable marks of strangulation. Two deaths, two methods, both deliberate. And then came the most haunting twist. Evidence suggested their bodies were not placed in the mine immediately after death. For at least 24 to 48 hours, they had been kept elsewhere, somewhere hidden, safe enough for a killer to store two lifeless bodies before sewing them into bags and lowering them into the earth. What kind of person would go to such lengths? This was no random act of violence in the forest, no panicked attempt to hide a crime. It was calculated, cold, almost ritualistic. To stitch the bags shut, to seal two human beings as if they were objects, was not just concealment. It was a statement. The discovery, shocking as it was, left investigators with more questions than answers. Who had such intimate knowledge of the mines? Who had the means to transport the bodies across rough forest trails? And why choose this elaborate method of hiding them? A long-awaited revelation had arrived, but instead of closure, it opened a darker chapter. The truth, it seemed, was still buried deeper than the mine itself. When the remains of Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards reached the medical examiner's laboratory, the silence of 11 years was finally broken, not with answers, but with horrors more unsettling than anyone imagined. Forensic doctors carefully examined the bones, piecing together the last violent moments of the young couple's lives. What they found painted a picture of deliberate cruelty, each detail colder than the last. Ray's cause of death was clear. The back of his skull bore a massive fracture, the kind inflicted by a heavy, blunt object. The strike was decisive, delivered with such force that survival was impossible. It was not a scuffle, not an accident, this was an execution. Nicole's remains told a different but equally chilling story. The delicate bones of her neck were fractured in a pattern unmistakable to forensic eyes. She had been strangled. Her end was slower, intimate, and terrifying. Two victims, killed in two entirely different ways, brutality and precision side by side. But the true shiver came with what science revealed next. Insects, soil traces, and the condition of the bones suggested the bodies had not been placed in the mine immediately. For at least 24 to 48 hours after their deaths, they had been kept somewhere else. A place where a killer could hide two bodies without fear of discovery. A garage, a cellar, an abandoned shed in the woods, wherever it was, it spoke of preparation. Someone had not only taken their lives, but calmly stored them, waited, and then chosen the right time to stitch them into sleeping bags and drop them into darkness. This single fact tore apart the idea of a chance encounter. This was not the frenzy of a wild recluse or a drifter passing by. It was the work of someone who had thought every step through, someone who knew the land and had the patience to orchestrate a disposal that would keep the secret buried for years. To sew the zippers shut with coarse thread, to seal the bodies inside like unwanted cargo, this was not merely hiding evidence, it was a ritual of control, a way of stripping two young lives of their humanity. For investigators, the autopsy was both a revelation and a curse. Now they knew with certainty Ray and Nicole had been murdered, yet the details raised darker questions than before. Who could strike with such force and then, in the same breath, strangle with such cold calculation? Who had a safe place ready for bodies, and the knowledge of a hidden mineshaft to use as a grave? The findings turned the case from a mystery of disappearance into a portrait of deliberate evil, and for those who heard the details, the families, the detectives, even the public, there was a deep sense of dread. Because such planning, such composure, meant the killer was no mad wanderer. He was someone who lived among ordinary people, hiding in plain sight, carrying a secret stitched shut for 11 long years. With the autopsy confirming murder, the investigation returned with renewed urgency. But instead of clarity, it uncovered only deeper layers of shadow. Detectives began reconstructing the crime with the few solid pieces of evidence they had, and each pointed toward something chilling. This was not a random act of violence, but the work of someone methodical, someone who understood both people and the land. The distance between where Ray and Nicole's car was found and the mine where their bodies lay was nearly 80 kilometers, much of it rough forest trail. To cover that ground, one needed more than chance. One needed a suitable vehicle, a familiarity with the terrain, and most unsettling of all, a knowledge of the old, forgotten mine shafts scattered across the landscape. This alone tilted suspicion towards a local, someone who had grown up around those woods, perhaps a hunter, a former miner, or even just a quiet resident who knew secrets that outsiders never could. The forensic team examined the sleeping bags and the thick twine used to stitch them shut. They were common items, sold in countless stores across the country, carrying no unique markings that could tie them to a single buyer. A few degraded DNA fragments were recovered, but they were too damaged by time and conditions underground to be traced to any individual. In one sense, it felt as though the killer had vanished as completely as the couple once had, present only in the violence he left behind. Still, the details gave birth to new theories. Some investigators considered the possibility of a predator who lived in the woods, a recluse with a twisted need to dominate. Others speculated about a serial killer, someone who prowled highways and forests in search of victims. Online communities of true crime enthusiasts pored over every scrap of detail, debating late into the night. Could the killer have been a truck driver, passing through, who knew exactly where to hide bodies? Or was he a neighbor, someone who smiled by day and hunted by night? Each theory had its own dark appeal. The idea of a serial killer was terrifying but familiar, a monster who could strike anywhere. The theory of a local predator was even more unnerving because it suggested he might still be there, living quietly, blending into ordinary life, carrying groceries, attending community events, perhaps even driving past the very bulletin boards where Ray and Nicole's faces once hung. The investigation kept circling back to one haunting truth. Whoever committed this crime was not careless. He left almost nothing behind. No fingerprints, no fibers of value, no clear trace of his movements. This kind of silence was not luck, it was discipline. And so, the case remained an open wound. Investigators pressed forward, but the answers slipped away like sand through their fingers. For the audience hearing this tale, the question now hangs in the air. Was it the work of a passing predator, a calculated serial killer, or a neighbor whose face was never suspected? Each possibility is terrifying in its own way, and none has yet been proven. The puzzle waits, daring us to choose which version of evil we believe. More than a decade after Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards set out on what should have been a simple road trip, the questions remain sharper than the answers. Their car was found intact, their belongings untouched, yet their lives ended with brutal precision. Their bodies lay hidden in the shades, earth for 11 long years, only to be discovered in a manner that suggested not accident, not chance, but the hand of someone cold and calculating. Today, the case is still unsolved. There is no face, no name, no confession to bring comfort to the grieving families. And that is perhaps the most disturbing truth of all. Because if someone could plan so carefully, strike so ruthlessly, and vanish back into ordinary life, then who exactly are we living alongside? Could the killer have been a stranger passing through, or someone's neighbor, blending unnoticed into the rhythms of daily life? That uncertainty lingers like a shadow, a reminder that safety is never as solid as we imagine. The story of Ray and Nicole is not just about 2 lives lost, but about the silence that follows when justice is denied. It is about the questions that keep investigators awake and the unease that makes ordinary people double-lock their doors at night. If this mystery unsettles you as it unsettles us, share your thoughts below. Do you believe the killer was a local predator, a passing serial hunter, or someone else entirely? Join the discussion, subscribe for more unsolved cases, and keep the conversation alive, because sometimes the truth is found not in silence, but in the voices that refuse to stop asking.